Oh, low. Okay. I'm going to show you guys how to do the 5 basic shading techniques. So we're going to start with tonal shading. And I'm writing the name underneath it in case you need it. It's called TONAL, tonal shading. And what you're first going to need to decide on is where your light source is coming from. So I'm just going to draw a little sun up here so that way it's obvious to everybody where my light is coming from. You don't have to draw a sun on your paper. If you're just using this as a reference, obviously you don't have to draw any of this at all. If you're using this as an Art 1 student, you'll have to follow along with me so you can pause this or play it as you need. So where the sun is hitting the circle is very important. So I'm just going to draw a line from my sun to my circle. And obviously it's not a perfectly straight line, but it's a line. And that would tell me that if this is a circle and I want to make it appear as a sphere, I want to add as much shading as possible to make it appear like there's depth in my picture. So the first thing I'm going to take into account is where my highlight is going to be. And that's where the light source is going to hit the object that you're shading. So I'm going to draw a light oval, and that's going to tell me where I'm going to leave the circle white, so that way it looks like a sphere. And I'm going to draw it lightly just so it doesn't have like a hard edge around it. And generally, if you're doing a circle, it's going to appear like an oval because that's the way that the highlight would appear on the oval. If you're doing like something like a cube, it might be a more linear type thing, but for a circle, we're going to draw a light oval, and I'm going to leave a little tiny bit of a gap between where I start the oval and the edge of the circle, just because you don't want any hard edges. What you want to do when you're shading is get rid of any hard lines and just shade every line that's there. So it appears like there's no lines in anything, because if you think about it, there's really no lines in life. Like even, I don't know, my windowsill that I'm looking at right in front of me, it's darker than what's behind it. So that's the reason I'm seeing it. It's not because there's a hard outline around it. So unless you're drawing like a cartoon or something anime, you're not going to have a hard outline. So I'm going to go directly across from that. And with tonal shading, your purpose is to make it as smooth as possible. So I'm going to start with a 6B pencil if you have drawing pencils. If you don't, you can just use the side of any pencil. If you're using mechanical, this is going to be a little bit tougher for you to do, because using the side of a mechanical pencil, the mechanical pencil still has like a point to it. So you're going to end up having like some linear, liney type things through it. However, any other pencil, like wooden pencils and such, you're just going to use the side of the pencil, and you're going to try to like kind of scrub it onto the paper. So you see I'm like holding it kind of by the bottom, the middle towards the bottom of the pencil. I'm not towards the tip. If you put too much pressure on the tip of it, that will make it liney too. And the whole purpose of tonal shading is to not have any lines. So notice that I'm kind of jumping around as I'm doing this. And this is called the core of my shadow. So this is going to be like the darkest spot on my circle. So I'm actually going to go back and darken it just a little bit more right now. And then as I go closer towards the highlight, both on the sides of the circle and up the middle of the circle, I'm going to make it try to appear lighter. And the way I'm going to do that is just kind of release the weight of my hand just a little bit at a time, so that it's slowly, gradually getting lighter as it goes. So there's no stop and start points. I'm noticing right now I have like this dark line where my dark stops and my medium starts. So I'm going to even go in between those two lines and kind of brush over that and blend that. Because what you want to try to get is no lines at all, just slowly, gradually going from dark to light. Now I'm going to go back up here. I'm getting a little bit lighter as I go. I use like little ovals, but you want to vary it as you're going, because if you repeat the same thing over and over again, you'll end up having lines. I know I've said that like a million times. But you want to try to not have lines. So if you start seeing lines appear in your circle, go in between those lines. There's a spot in between it. That's why you see those lines, and just fill that in too. Or you can go the opposite direction. If you start seeing your lines like just going up and down, up and down, up and down, go across it. That would help get rid of some of your lines. So slowly but surely, I'm making my way to the highlight. By the time I get to the highlight, I want to barely be touching the paper. So it's going to be extremely light. Now with tonal shading, you can use a couple of different things to help you blend it together after you're done. So if you have any lines that you can't seem to get rid of by going in between those lines or around those lines with other lead, you can take your finger, you could take a piece of tissue. If you have tortillions at home, you can use those. Stump sticks, oh, they're called a lot of different things, but they're basically paper that's wrapped up and glued up together. I call them tortillions, but a lot of people call them shading stumps, whatever. But if you don't have those, which I don't have those, I'm gonna just use my finger. Or you could just use a piece of toilet paper. I will tell you that toilet paper and tissue paper works a little bit better than like paper towels. I think that's because it has a little bit of lotion in it. It's more of like a soft texture versus like a crispy paper towel texture. So you see I went from dark to medium to light, and now I'll just use my finger, because this is always something everybody has, so you can't say you don't have it. And you just take your finger, brush over it, like I'm pushing just back and forth with my finger. I am going across the way I did it, so that way it gets in between those spaces. And then it does start to lighten up your darkest spot. So if it lightened it up a lot, like if you use tissue or paper towel or something like that, it's going to lighten it up a lot. You might want to go back in to the core of the shadow, and just darken it up one last time before you're like completely finished with that circle. Now it is going to have a cast shadow that appears. So what that is the shadow that is cast by whatever object you are shading. So for this object, it's a circle. So it's going to go across from the highlight again, just like the core of the shadow was. So I'm going to draw an oval just on the other side, because it would cast a shadow across from it, like on the other side of it. And usually, since it's a diagonal, oh, I just drew a line in there, my apologies. I would just kind of draw it like this, and it would kind of represent a circular type shape, like an oval. But mine goes off the page, so I apologize. And then you would just shade this in dark. Now, if it starts to blend in with your core of your shadow, you can make it just a little bit lighter than that. So that way you can see like some sort of difference there. And the whole point again is just trying to get rid of your lines, so you don't see any lines anymore. You should just see shadow. That's realism. I can't believe I drew a line through there, so let me just erase it real fast. Okay. The next one is, let's do scumbling, because it's very fast. Scumbling. Scumbling is legitimately scribbling. So it's purposeful scribbling, but it's still scribbling. So again, I'm going to take my pencil. I'm going to draw a line from my sun to where it would hit my circle. That is where my oval is going to go, where my highlight's going to be. So I'm going to draw it really lightly, a little bit away from the edge again. Then I'm going to go directly across from that. And I'm going to start scribbling dark. Okay. So this is one of the techniques where you want to be purposeful about it, but you can be a little crazy. You can go outside the lines a little bit if you want to. And what this is supposed to end up looking like is a sphere again, but maybe like a ball of yarn or like a ball of hair, but a perfectly circular ball of hair. So as you're going up, again, you're going to release the weight of your hand. You're not going to press as hard. So that way it looks like it's getting lighter. And notice I'm not doing X, 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 because that tends to look too perfect. You kind of just want to jump all over the place. Pretend it's like, I don't know, a mouse on ADD. So just jump, 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 jump. And then as you get closer to the highlight, again, you're going to barely be touching the paper by the time you get there, and feel free to overlap some of the lines here just a little bit to make it appear like it's fuzzy. And you probably should be able to count like maybe 5 different values, like a dark, a medium, a light, and then in between those, like 2 more, separating those. But generally dark, medium, light, especially with circles, should be there, and then there should be intermittent things in between those that make it blend, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go back in, darken up my dark. I did not say this earlier, but I have a 6B drawing pencil in my hand, which means that I can get a lot darker than you can if you have like a mechanical pencil, or if you are drawing with a just generic wooden pencil, which is totally fine. You just won't be able to get it this dark, so don't stress if you can't, okay? So that's scumbling, very easy. You don't want to smudge scumbling because that ends up looking like tonal. You don't want it to have like mushed lines. You want those lines to be crisp so it looks textured. The next one is stippling. Stippling. This one's the hardest, I'm not gonna lie. You draw a line over the circle. Where it hits it, you're gonna draw your nice oval for your highlight. Make it light. Stippling is a bunch of dots. Now, I've already used my pencil for 2 other circles, so it's already getting dull, which is kind of perfect for this. Now, when you're in your dark spot, you are going to do a bunch of tiny dots that are close together and heavy with your hand. Push as hard as you can. Now, a lot of people end up drawing O's for this. Don't draw an O. It's supposed to be pointillism. It's supposed to be a point. Stipple dots. Now you might notice that you can't really hear my pencil hitting the paper. That's because I'm barely lifting it. I'm pretending like I'm a tattoo gun. I'm just going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And I'm quickly kind of moving it around the circle as I do that. So that way I'm covering more space faster. If you end up going like this with the paper, it's gonna make a lot of noise and drive you crazy. Or maybe just everybody else around you. Now, as you get closer to the highlight, you are going to leave a little space, show a little bit more of the white of the paper. That's what's going to make it appear lighter, as well as just not pressing as hard. So this is kind of boring for y'all to watch. Sorry. Don't do dashes, don't do O's, do dots. I actually did a painting using pointillism back in middle school of this eagle. And I don't know if this is just my memory being awful from back then or if this is real life, but I think it took months of art class. I think at that point I had art like once a week. So it probably took up to like maybe 12 weeks. That's just crazy. Anyways, you might notice I kind of bounce around with this just because I get tired. My hand gets tired. You gotta kind of bounce around. And the whole thing is going to be covered eventually, so it's okay to kind of bounce around and come back. Now, as again, you're closer to the highlight, make them lighter, barely touch the paper, and make less of them. You don't need as many because you're trying to use the white of the paper to represent the light part. I started to hear that a little bit. Now, if you have drawing pencils like I do, you can start to use a different drawing pencil, like especially if you can't use the weight of your hand, like if you're a little heavy-handed, which some of you I'm sure are. So maybe downgrade to like a H, 2H, or even just a 2B. Let me talk actually while we're doing this about pencils. So there's a gradient. I don't know another word. There's a scale. So the B's are the soft pencils. So if you have B's, they get softer as they get bigger in number. So 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B, 10B. I think they have 12B, but 10B is like the darkest I've seen. I usually only buy up to 6B. So that's the darkest and the softest. So if you're drawing on a paper with like an 8B, 6B, 10B, you're going to be able to smudge it a lot easier than the people that are using like regular lead wooden pencils. If you wanted to do something with a lighter line and it's harder pencil, so you won't be able to smudge it as easily, like, I don't know, maybe you're doing like eyelashes or something that you want to stay there after you're done drawing it, you might want to use like a 2H to start with. So that way it's a harder pencil, H hard. And they get harder as the number goes up. So 2H, 4H, 6H. I don't even use those. If I'm being honest, I don't like them. For a couple of different reasons, but my main reason is it cuts into the paper. So if you make a mistake and you try to erase an H, it usually leaves a little dig mark. Some of you may have like gotten into this experience where you're trying to erase something and then you try to shade over it and this line keeps appearing in what you're drawing or shading and you can't get rid of it. That's because there's a little, like basically like a divot, like a crevasse in your paper that appears because it dug into your paper. And that might be because you drew with a hard pencil and tried to erase it. Or it could be you drew something on top of another piece of paper and the paper on top of it like pressed into it with your pencil weight or pen or whatever. And that caused a crevasse in the paper beneath it, which just isn't ideal. You can kind of go in there with a pencil and shade it later on if you need to. but it doesn't completely get rid of it ever, so it kind of stinks. So that's my disdain of H pencils while I finish this doodling. Sorry for the rant. Okay, so you do have to go everywhere. I'm going even around the other side of the highlight. You guys can see. I'm going to come back a little later because I don't like how the dark goes straight to the medium, but I need a break. So I'm going to go on to contour hatching and come back. So contour hatching. Contour means the outside of the object that you're drawing. So contour in this case is going to be circular. So I'm just going to go around and around. On a circle, if you're talking about the outside edge, your hand is always going to go around. It's not going to go in a straight line. So again, sun to the edge of your circle, draw your oval for where your highlight's going to be. And I'm going to start in my core of my shadow again, like the darkest spot. I always start with my darkest because it's easier for me to get lighter and lighter than it is for me to get darker and darker. If it's easier for you the opposite way, that's totally fine. What I want you to picture for this one is like a globe, like that sits on a desk somewhere. So you're going to go around the outside edge and you're drawing lines this time. You do want your lines to appear on like tonal shading. So you're going to go around and just draw little lines that go in the core of the shadow. This one's pretty fast, unlike the stippling. And again, as you get closer to the highlight, you're going to make those lines lighter and they're going to get further apart so that there's more of the paper shining through, so it looks lighter. Now there's a point where I'm like, okay, I don't know, this is getting a little straight, so I'm going to make sure I want to go around this. So you can start real light and go around and down and down. And this is kind of like what the longitude or latitude lines would look like, depending on which angle you're looking at it on. And it's okay, this is supposed to look sloppy. So looking at mine in the camera is a lot different than looking at it in person. So I noticed that there's like some spaces over here I want to fill. Always try to back away from your artwork occasionally. For me, I could just look at my screen, but you might have to like get up, walk away, have somebody hold it for you, look at it from further away so you see the big picture. Because when you're sitting right on top of it, it's hard to see everything and you end up focusing on little tiny minute details that really don't matter. So back away. And I'm just going to come in here and add a couple lines on this side here. And I want to get lighter towards the highlight, but not like disappeared. So I'm just going to do a couple too. Okay, there's contour hatching. And again, looking at it on the screen, I feel like this has to be even darker. The core of the shadow. It's always okay to go back and fix things, edit things as you see fit. Now, if you're doing another shape other than a circle, just know that the contour would be whatever shape you're drawing. So if you're drawing like a banana, it would be a long line that's curved. If you were drawing a pineapple, it might look different with the texture. You might have to do diamond shaped. So the next one and the last one is cross contour hatching. So it's the same thing, except for it has a cross as well. So cross contour hatching. For this one, same thing here, draw a line. So you're over for your highlight. I'm just going to start here this time since I'm already up there. And make them get wider and wider as you go down. Some of you might find this easier if your core of the shadow's on the other side. This one's easier for me this way because I'm left-handed, so it's easier for me to draw circles this way. If you're right-handed, it's going to be easier for you to draw circles that way, if that makes sense. And again, this is sloppy, but that's okay because it's supposed to kind of look a little sloppy. Now that I'm on the core of the shadow, I'm going to darken this up real nice. Make my edges a little bit smoother. And it is normal if your lines start to look straight. However, that's not what you want, so stop. If your lines start looking straight, be like, whoa, back up. This is a circle. I don't want straight lines on my contour edges of my circle. Make sure you're trying to keep that in mind. All of these lines should curve like they would around a globe. And you should see your lines. Don't smooth them out to the point where you can't see them anymore. Oh, and also, if you're heavy-handed, some of you might be heavy-handed. Most of us are light-handed, but if you're a little heavy-handed, I think I might have said that the opposite way. A lot of people are heavy-handed. Not a lot of people are light-handed. So heavy-handed people, you can always take an eraser and like brush off a top layer just with like a thick eraser if it gets too dark. So don't stress if you're really dark off the gate. All right, now we have to go across the contour. So these are like the longitude lines or the latitude lines, depending on which ones you did first. So what I like to do is just draw a line from the core of the shadow going up towards the highlight, just a straight line. This is the only straight line you're going to draw on this because the rest of them are going to curve up and around. So I want you to picture it. Sorry, I'm looking at my camera like I'm a hand that's holding a circle, like a sphere of some sort. So my middle finger, as you're looking at it in the camera, straight up and down, but the other ones curve around the object. They're going to curve around it to go back up towards the top. So I want you to picture it like this, going from the South Pole to the North Pole, but at a curvature. So I'm going to go around and up, and I'm going to draw just a couple of these around and up. And you want to point towards like the middle of your oval. You see how those go around and up? So none of those are straight. They go out and then they go back towards the middle, out and then back towards the middle. And they keep on doing that until you're towards the outside. Same thing on this side if you want to do them on the other side. Like this one will be straight because it goes directly across, and you can draw like a couple little lines coming from the other side if you want to. But your point here, it looks too perfect right now, is to kind of like make it imperfect. So I want to kind of come in between and make some lines shorter, make some lines longer, and that way it blends a little bit. And it'll help with your core of your shadow, make it darker. Now you might notice I ignored the cast shadows on these. That's because I just didn't want to sit here and shade them in and waste your time on this video. So I'm going to show you where I would draw those, and then you would just fill them in solid. But I am going to go back to the stippling real fast and fix it before we end this video. So obviously now I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. I can see all these little spots in here. I'm looking for white spaces in between darker spots, so that way I can fill them in, especially in the core of the shadow, to make it appear darker. And then again, as I'm going up, I wanted to get rid of like the harsh difference between the dark shading part and the medium shading part. So I'm going to go over that edge and just kind of sporadically do some dots and kind of break apart that line a little bit. And again, this is the most painstaking one, but a lot of people hate doing it, and I understand why, but some people really love this. It's kind of like one of those meditating type things for some people. Obviously, some people just get stressed out by it, but some people find it like very peaceful just to do the dots and then kind of back away. And I'll show you some examples in class of that later. Can you see all the smudge marks from my hand? Just so you guys know, you will get dirty. You will have to wash your hands, especially if you use your finger for smudging. So basically I'm going to draw these cast shadows. So an oval shape right here, I'd fill that in solid. This one would be kind of like this because it's on the other side, so it'd be a little bit more circular. This one will be oval. This one will be extremely oval. And then you would just fill it in. Okay, so that's it for the shading techniques. I look forward to seeing you in class.